So hello friends, welcome to Medicine 101. Today we'll talk about necrosis. So it's the quite the basic topic in the animal pathology. So we'll talk about the necrosis. So first of all, in the previous video I already explained what is necrosis. So very briefly. So let me just tell these things but once again. So necrosis, we can define the necrosis in terms of what is irreversible cell injury. Irreversible cell injuries means we'll see the ultimately we'll see the what the death of the cell over here. That means if we just remove the causative agents that is causing the cell death, will not get the cells in its normal form. That means what will not get the cells in its normal form. Okay, the cell will get die over here. Okay. Now see the necrosis we can define. For example, if I just say over here, there is a cell. See, there is a cell. If we see the lethal injury. If we see the lethal injury over here, okay, the cell, we'll see the progressions of the cell before it's getting died over here. Okay, for example, just like this, and we're seeing the death of the cell. Now, before death of the cells, we are seeing some morphological changes of the cell over here. So the morphological changes that we see, okay, before the death of the cell, that is known as the necrosis. So what is necrosis? Necrosis will be, in the better way to define it, is the morphological changes that we see before the cell death. Okay, the morphological changes of a cell we see before the death of the cell over here. Okay. Now see, let me write it over for definitions purpose over here. So definitely the differences between what the apoptosis and necrosis you need to know. Okay, I'll just tell those things in a couple of minutes. Now see, in the necrosis we can just say in terms of what the series of morphological changes of a cell before its death. Just like this you can remember. Okay. Now, why we see the necrosis? The most common cause over here we see before. Okay, in this case is why I just said that hypoxia over here. Okay, so the most common cause of hypoxia over here. Now we can classify the necrosis in the different ways. Okay, now let's classify the necrosis. The types of necrosis we just see over here. Whatever the types of necrosis we'll get. The first we'll get, for example, the coagulative necrosis. Coagulative necrosis. We'll get then what? We'll get liquefactive necrosis. Okay. Then we'll get gaseous necrosis. Okay. We'll get the fat necrosis over here. We'll get the fibrinoid necrosis. Now we'll talk about each of the necrosis types of the necrosis or in details. Okay. So first thing first, we'll talk about the coagulative necrosis. So if I just say in terms of the coagulative necrosis over here, coagulative necrosis. Now, what do you know about the coagulative necrosis? The coagulative necrosis is the most common type of the necrosis over here. Okay, the coagulative necrosis is the most common type of the necrosis. Now, basically, we know that whenever there is a deficiency of oxygen, so if you see the severe hypoxia over here, okay, in these cases we can also see what necrosis definitely. So, in terms of the coagulative necrosis, we can see that what the etiology you can see here, that deficiency of oxygen. So, severe hypoxia. If you see the severe hypoxia over here, then you can see this type of the necrosis over here. Okay. Now let me show it over here. Whenever we'll see this like etiology over here, in these cases we'll see severe hypoxia, and whenever we'll see the severe hypoxia, definitely what do we know, that the oxygen that will be too much less over here. The oxygen will be severely decreased. The oxygen will fall down over here. Okay, so whenever the oxygen will fall down, just think about the one thing, that the what, there will be no enough productions of the ATP. There will be no enough productions of the ATP for the metabolism of the cells, just to integrate, or just to have make the balance of the cells in terms of the rigidity. Okay, the cellular structures, the different types of the proteins are also there, that I'm going to say right now. Okay, so we'll see the severe hypoxia, deficiency of oxygen over here. As a result, we'll see whenever the oxygen deficiency is over here, the ATP that will be production will be also less. That should also dramatically decrease over here. Now why? For example, if we just say in terms of these things, okay, from the biochemistry link, we know that the glycolysis, from the glycolysis we know what will come over here, the TCA cycle over will come over here. Now in the TCA cycle over here, we need to use the oxygen over here to produce the what? In the electron transport steps, we need to use the oxygens to get the energies. But when the oxygen is less, as a result, what? The ultimate or the total ATP production, that will be less over here. Okay. Now see, what do we know in terms of the glycolysis? We will get the end product over here. What? Pyruvic acid. We will get the pyruvic acid over here. Now whenever the oxygen is less, and as a result, what? We will see definitely there will be what? Anaerobic respiration. In terms of the anaerobic respiration, we will see what? This pyruvic acid that will be converted into what? Lactic acid. We will get the lactic acid, and whenever we will see the lactic acid over here, definitely the pH that will fall down. So whenever we see the lactic acid over here, the pH will see, the pH will that will fall down over here. And whenever we are seeing the pH that is less, so definitely, whenever the pH is less, okay, in these cases, we will see the different types of the problems in terms of the proteins and in terms of the enzymes. So there will be what? Denaturations of the protein and enzymes, because for enzymes to work clearly, they need to have the optimum pH. But if the pH is getting decreased over here, so in these situations, the enzymes will be not able to work properly. As a result, also we'll see the protein also. So for the same thing in case of the protein also. Okay. So we'll see the denaturations of the protein and enzymes. So denaturation. So denaturation of protein and enzyme. Denaturation of the proteins and enzymes in this case we will see, because of the pH that is getting down over here. Okay. Now see, whenever we will see the denaturations of the protein and enzymes, definitely if we say for example the cell over here, okay, now within the cells there are surface proteins. We know that there is a presence of surface protein within the cells over here. Whenever we will see that denaturations of these things, proteins and enzymes, we will see definitely over here. Okay, this surface protein will get coagulated. That means we will see coagulations of the surface protein. Coagulation of surface protein. Now what is the reason? In these cases we will see the hydrolytic enzymes. Okay, the hydrolytic enzymes that will not act that much. Okay, let me show you over here. Okay, let me do this one. In this case, we see the hydrolysis of cell membrane will not take place. Will not take place in these cases. As a result, we will see there will be coagulations of the surface protein. For this, membrane that will get impact. So there will be no problem as far as the membrane is concerned. Okay. So we will say membrane that will intact. Okay. In these cases, we will see there will be no problem as far as the membrane is concerned. Okay. Now we will see what are the other problems we will see in these cases. For example, this type of the coagulative necrosis, it is from all type of the tissues or all type of the organs except the CNS. Okay, so this coagulative necrosis found in all types of tissues except the CNS. In the CNS, we cannot see these things. In CNS, I'll talk about these things. We can see most of the cases the liquefactive necrosis over here. Okay, so this is the thing. Now we need to know some the basic points, some the terminologies about these things. The terminology, what is these things? First, let me write it over here. The Jenker's degenerations. We need for the Jenker's degenerations. Now, Jenker's degeneration, what is it? Jenker's degeneration. In these cases, we will see, for example, an individual who is having the typhoid fever or typhoid, who is suffering from typhoid, and we can see also that the coagulative necrosis in these patients or individual, we will see that, okay, so the person is suffering from what? Typhoid. And in these persons, we will see the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles. We will see this type of the necrosis. Okay, there is the coagulative necrosis over here. Now, this type of the things, if we see in terms of the individual is suffering from typhoid, and if we see this type of the necrosis, that is known as Zenker's degenerations over here. Okay. Definitely, whenever the necrosis will be over here, for example, then okay, let me show. For examples, just thing like this is the piece of the myocardium over here. Okay, now if we see the necrosis is over here, for example, in terms of the myocardial infections, definitely we'll see over here the infiltrations of the different types of the WBCs. Okay, so we'll see over here infiltrations of, for example, neutrophils. So we'll see different types of the neutrophils, not only the neutrophils, also along with the neutrophils, we'll see the different types of the what? WBCs that will come over here. Now we'll talk about how the infections is forming, infections, because we are seeing that we already said the severe hypoxia. How we are seeing the severe hypoxia in these cases. Okay, let me show this part over here. Now, for examples, just try to be with me over here. Okay, let me erase this part also. Now see, think about this thing that there is a blood vessels over here. Still normally, okay. Okay, the blood vessels over here. Now for any regions we are seeing the fibrofatty flare or atherosclerotic situations we have been found over here. So see one thing that whenever we will see this type of the problem, okay, let me use this combination for its better understanding. See, for example, we are seeing over here the plaque. So when you have the obstructions over here, we are seeing the obstruction over here. Definitely the blood flow that will be definitely less. Whenever the blood flow is less, definitely along with the blood, we know what is over there, the nutrients, different types of the nutrients, the oxygen especially, the oxygen, we will see the deficiency of what? Oxygen over here. We will see in these cases the deficiency of oxygen for the obstructions. Now this region, so let me show you this other part over here. If we see these things, these regions, it will be there will be deficiency of oxygen, so there will be what? Infections. We will see the infections over here in terms of the what? Coagulative necrosis. In terms of coagulative necrosis, here we will get what? The pale color. What? The oxygen is less, so as a result we will see hypoxia. For the development of hypoxia, we will get the pale color. Okay, in this case. Definitely, we can say over here the infections followed by the what? Ischemia over here. Now these are the regions where area of blood supply over here. Area of blood supply. And these regions is not getting enough blood for having the what? Obstructions. As a result, in these cases the blood flow will be less, oxygen will be less over here. So the area of blood flow here, area of blood supply. Okay, in these cases we will see this type of the regions. Now, as far as the infarction is concerned, we can just classify the infarctions in the two types: red infarction or white infarctions. Red means we will see the definitely more severe cases, and white the less severe cases. So let's talk about here in terms of the infarctions. Now see, we can see the red infarctions, we can see the white infarctions. Okay. The red infarctions where we can see in terms of the loose connective tissue. In terms of the loose connective tissue, we can see the what? The red infarctions over here. Okay. For example, we can see in terms of the lungs, liver, for example, etc. In this cases we can see. And white infections we can see white in case of the end arterial organs. So in arterial organs. So where is the end arterial organs? This present. Let me show over here. In arterial organ. Now in arterial organ, where we will see in terms of the what heart, definitely we can say, for example, one is heart over here. In terms of the solid organs, so we'll see what the heart. You can see also in terms of the kidney over here. So this is all about what the first types of the necrosis, that is the coagulative necrosis, and the rest types of the necrosis, like the the liquefactive necrosis, the fibrinoid necrosis, the fat necrosis, the caseous necrosis. I'll talk about all these things in the subsequent parts. Okay. So thanks for watching. If you understand this part, please like and subscribe my channels. Thanks.